First off, my office supplies. Uh, it went from 500 to 250. Um, Small tools, minor equipment. There we are. Sorry. It stayed the same at 2,500. Fuel and lubricants for like the vehicle and sort of thing is $1,000, stayed the same. Travel, training, and mileage, that went from 2,200 to 3,100. And the reason being is I'm going to attempt to attend a couple training classes this upcoming year. One is the NACO High Performance Leadership Academy, and also the Facilities Expo, yearly meeting at in Portland. And the additional is $500 miscellaneous. Next on the agenda is my contracted services. That went up slightly from 6,830 to 7,000. And that's just a result of some of my contractors that do the, like say the fire alarm annual inspections and the sprinkler inspections and the alarm monitoring. They increased their fees a little since over last year. Going right along, the utilities, they remain the same. You can't really, argue with what the electrical bill is going to be every month. Water fees is pretty much the same. $2,500. It stayed the same as last year. Same as the sewer fees, same. Garbage collections, also the same. And heating fuel, we decided to drop that down from 3,400 to 2,500 because after a meeting back in February and doing a couple quick calculations, we realized that we over budgeted last year. So we cut it down to 25,000 this year. We should be fine with that amount.
Well, Kevin, let me ask, if you go back to the actual, in 22-23 is 42,327.
Mm-hmm.
Why would it drop by almost 17,000 or whatever?
Well, what we do is we meet in February and we look at how much we spent, like from July 1st to February, whenever we meet. And we take that figure and look at how much time we have left. And that's where we come up with these different numbers. And also over the period of years, except for this year, we've been having to run the fuel longer, depending on the weather. It stays colder longer. Really, the consumption is weather dependent. And so far this year, last year was 34,000 compared to 42,000, just because it stayed colder longer back in 22, 23. Every time the fuel truck comes by and fills us up every Monday, it's about a $1,500, $1,600 bill. So
are you burning number 2 diesel mainly or what?
Yes, number 2 diesel.
This looks to me, and it's a fairly minor thing in the big picture, but you haven't been 25,000 for several years. See,
right.
I think it's low, but I guess I'd defer to your judgment, but I don't see heating oil going down in price anywhere.
Right, unless we have this upcoming year a really bizarre winter where it stays colder longer, which traditionally over the last several years, the winters have been less and less severe. I mean, we had a cold snap that was pretty bad here a couple months or a month ago. I think we might be right on with that. We'll see.
Well, I'm sure you'll try to keep us warm.
Oh yeah.
We're all gonna wear a coat.
I won't shut the heat off and make everybody wear sweaters or coats for sure. Next item.
I have an electric heater in my little office, which you allowed me to do.
Well, we'll see when you turn that on, if it pops a breaker or two. We might have to adjust that.
I tried it once and it worked okay.
Okay, good. My next area is just janitorial services, $500, staying the same as last year. Janitorial supplies, we decreased that by $1,000 from 10,000 to 9,000. And building and grounds, that's just everything that falls under the sun to help keep a 90-year-old building going. We decreased that amount by about, what is it, maybe about $1,850. And the vehicle allowance stays the same as 4,450. I don't anticipate any large expenditure for the vehicle, but it could change the moment I turn the key on here after the meeting. Our equipment is 500, stays the same. And permit fees stays the same. Overall, the total for the materials and services is $178,050, which is a $10,780 decrease over last year. That's all I really have. Mine is quick and down and dirty and easy. If anybody has any questions, feel free to let me have them.
Questions for Kevin? Or Rachel, either one.
Pretty straightforward. Thank you, Kevin.
Yep,
thanks,
pretty
Kevin.
easy. Thank you.
Okay, well, then let's say that one's good, and there are always a lot of unknowns because you can't predict the weather, so let's go on, now you had one more you wanted to go back to which one?
Fund 301. So what Kevin just presented was the day-to-day maintenance of facilities. What I'm going to present for the facilities department is the building improvement fund, Fund 301. This is where the projects are. So this fund supports courthouse maintenance and improvements, and it has supported other funds or other projects for other departments, most notably just the other general fund department that has a facility, which is the justice facility. Last year, there was a couple of projects for them in there, but otherwise, you're looking at a courthouse maintenance and repair fund. So this year, Commissioner Scar mentioned this earlier, we hired a contractor to complete a facilities condition assessment. I don't think we've ever had one that I've seen in the county's history. So that was completed. We just received a report from them and a presentation at our leadership team this month and talked through that. And so what I have presented in this budget are priorities for the courthouse improvements. The first couple, so elevator on the left side, I'll point you again to the bottom of the budget form. And just the first two columns where there's the projects and the total cost, because we're looking at multi-year funding here. So elevator upgrades, upkeep on the parking lots, some badge readers in the HR and treasurer departments, a contingency. We should always have a contingency in this fund because there is projects that are going to absolutely come up throughout the year. And then the 23 FCA, that's the facility condition recommendations. So everything under the facilities condition recommendations are projects from them. The other ones are ones that Kevin and I know of that need to be included. The ones with an asterisk are energy upgrade projects. The ones without are not. And so these are the high priority projects that our contractor is recommending, and looking at the whole courthouse, we should be looking at. It is important to note the assessment evaluated what we have today. So there are things that the courthouse needs, sprinklers, expanded HVAC, ADA, etc. Those are not in here. They evaluated existing systems, what the condition is, and do we need upgrades for those. So here's the list of projects. In the next two columns, you see the funding. Fund 301, that's the fund we're looking at, and 196. 196 is ARPA. ARPA, one of the existing projects in ARPA is lighting. So we have some already allocated to that. We knew we needed that before our contractor came along and did this assessment. And so everything else, these are general fund projects. Everything else is in 301. So if we were going to implement what we need to do per this assessment, we are looking at around $4 million. The assessment describes how these priorities should be implemented over a 2-year project or a 2-year period. And they're big projects. They would probably naturally happen that way anyway. So the last two columns show a potential, this is just my first stab at a financial strategy. is what I think we could, that are lower in cost that we could accomplish in 24, 25 and save for the next year, the next fiscal year, most notably the HVAC work, and then fully implement those in 25, 26. I know this is a big ticket item. I know this is a big chunk of general fund dollars. I know this is probably going to get cut, and there's some opportunities to pursue grants and offset the costs, but we should probably have spending authority in there, so I could see some alternative and caveats built into this budget approval. But as the facilities director, I think I must recommend these projects to you. But I understand where we are and I understand how much these projects cost. So that is Fund 301.
MJ, just go ahead.
Why don't you, go ahead.
Yeah, she was
Take the
looking for-
questions first.
Are there any rebates for any of these upgrades? Yes.
All of the-
Do you have an idea of those?
I don't. I know solar, all of them will.
Okay.
I don't know how much on the HVAC. I'm still waiting to hear what those are. We're still gonna have to put in I think a good chunk of money, but there absolutely are rebates and grant funds for this with this contractor. The nice thing about working with this contractor is they're an energy company. They take us to the implementation.
And with the HVAC, if this building, let's just say, pretend that the other building you're looking at purchasing and you remodel this, will the HVAC that you put in still work for the remodel? I mean, because if you shift rooms around, you know what I mean? You might
Yeah,
have to-
yep, I know what you mean. There's a lot of areas in the courthouse that do not have HVAC. And recall the timeline of the move, 29.
Got it. Okay.
And then by the time we could come up with funding to do anything here, we are probably beyond the life of these installations. I'm just guessing. I mean, because we're a long ways out from coming back here after the
Got it.
move.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
but it's a great question.
And you,
Yeah, more of a comment, a half-formed comment or thought than really a question, but in line with potential move to a new building, does it make sense to defer things like solar for this building?
I agree. I think we've never had a conversation about solar. I think if I had to take something off, that would be the first one, unless we can fully fund it through grants. Which, if we can, let's keep it in here. But Rachel, you're not doing the project unless it's grant funded. For example, could be a note in the budget.
Or if the return on the investment is 5
Yeah.
years out
Yeah.
before the move, then it would make sense to do it.
And so the biggest question I put before you, I think, with this budget is, I can't guarantee grant funding. And if I can't get any grant, I'm pretty sure we're gonna get some, but I don't know how much, is if we can't get whatever amount it is that we think we want to offset from the general fund, we still have these deficiencies. And so how much should we be saving for out of the general fund, if anything, to try to move these projects forward? So, just thought provoking. I don't have a good answer on this. I just know, well, let's pivot to
Yeah, Rachel, if I could just comment on that, that's to our long-term strategy pieces that we have not done in the past. At the level I think we need to relate to our assets and what is our long-term goal. You know, we probably won't solve that in this budget committee this year, but it's a conversation we need to start in this budget committee this year. And hopefully, you know, there may be some workshops between this year and next year where we really come together and look at this. I hope we will hear from the Sheriff's Department about their facilities needs as well, because they are significant at the Justice Facility in addition to here. And then, you know, Parks would be in their special revenue fund, but certainly with the courthouse and the Justice Facility, there's some serious and significant things to think about that need to be part of our conversation as we think about what general fund revenue we have, what tools are available. To Michael's earlier comment about, are we bonding, are we borrowing? You know, how do we get through this? How do we make sure this building doesn't fall down? Because even if we move the courts out of this building, the rest of us stay. this facility has to go on.
So the last piece I wanted to share with you in this packet is, Deborah's got it up here on the screen. This was, I forget what the title is called in your packet, but it's the summary of all the facilities out of the facilities condition assessment. And the point I was gonna make is.
I was gonna say, it's not in the packet, it's just online,
Oh, it's
right?
online, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's on the screen. Yeah. So as you will see across all the facilities, there's a total over the next just couple of years of $12 million in facilities upgrade needs in the next couple of years. And so with the courthouse, they had in this sheet recommended window upgrades. I don't think it's appropriate to do it this time for a bunch of reasons. So I've deferred that one. That's why the math doesn't add up on the total. The jail has 6 million. That's general fund department. This is what we need to do in the next 2 years. They are recommending. This doesn't have anything else that comes up foreseen, and it doesn't have all the other things that are waiting in the wings behind these projects. So just emphasizing, again, I know where we are on budget, but there's a lot of deferred need in facilities.
Questions on that one?
Does the HVAC include ducting? Because the ducting is 60, 80 years old. Does it include that too?
I'm not certain. I think they assessed all of that. So I think it does, but I'm not 100% certain.
Because old ducting, one of the buildings I was in had asbestos in
Yeah.
the ducting. So
Yeah.
I look at that as a priority.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's interesting on this particular table, if you take out solar, it takes out a large chunk of what is at the sheriff and jail. They end up at 1.2 million instead of 6. Not sure why their
Yeah.
solar was so much, but it's 1.2 is still a very significant number that we need to be thinking about when we look at what is there. But just that table itself is a little misleading as I'm looking at it, sideways and upside down.
Yep.
So this is the next 2 years, I'm sorry, what was the total, or the grand total?
So the total is in the far right column in the white box. It's $12.6 million with all the solar. So 5.4 of that is solar.
Yeah, so it's 7.1 without
Yeah.
the solar. And recognizing that, let's see, health is a special district, public works, Pioneer Museum, library. So it's really the first 2 columns that fall to general fund.
Budget. 300. Oh, okay. That's good.
One of the issues with public agencies that I've seen over the years is we almost never establish sinking funds because A, there's no tax benefits, and B, there's almost always greater demands, including political pressure and who knows what, to spend the money you have. And so private business can say, okay, well, we're going to put aside 8% of our gross revenues every year, and when the time comes for whatever, then you write a check and get it done. And in a perfect world, that's what would happen. But I've only seen 2 organizations in my whole career that did that, public agencies, and it's just not the practice. It's the exception. And so to say, well, you have these unmet needs now, which are very genuine, and McKinstry, I thought, did a really, really good job with their facility study. But where do you get the money? And then you're faced with competing priorities. Well, you got a radio system, and you got this, and you got a building, and now you got all these other capital needs. And so governments typically go out and go from one mini crisis, not a big deal sometimes, but they go from one issue to another issue to another because they haven't put any money aside. And it's perfectly understandable why, because, this room could fill up with people that are wanting something, and they may have a perfectly legitimate need, and priorities change. But, you get to the point where the building's almost falling down around us, which this is not. Our rating from McKinstry was actually average or a bit above. So for a building this age and all the various components, we could be a whole lot worse, the way I read it. But still, when it comes time to come up with 3 or 4, 7 or $12 million, it's a problem. So we were like 2.8 what was our rating, Rachel, like 2.7 or something out of 5?
It was it fair? I think it was not poor.
No, but it
Yeah.
was slightly above average, as I remember. I'd have to go up and look, but.
Yeah.
So, which I thought, I was surprised when I saw that, because this is an old building that's been, you know, reasonably well maintained. I think it's safe, warm and dry most of the time. But, you know, it's still, you know, there's, and I don't know how many, I'll bet you there's been $50 million put in this building over the years just to keep it going. But there hasn't been a $50 million at one time to really bring it forward. So what you're looking at here, I think, is in my experience here in Tillamook County, this is one of the first genuine, coordinated, structured efforts to get a handle on all this stuff. We just gotta figure out how to pay for it.
I would ask for quantification of $6 million, or excuse me, almost $5 million in solar for the sheriff and jail. It seems significantly higher than, and I realize it's a large facility, but it seems like an exorbitant amount.
And I don't think solar would be our priority, and but I do think, and again, I'm sure the sheriff will talk about this when it's his time to present. There's some very concerning pieces around HVAC. One of those is a backup generator as well as in there, and just some pieces that when you have folks in custody, you can't wait until it breaks, right? You know, and even in our facility here, looking at the HVAC, you know, it's we don't want to wait until it breaks. The cost is greater if we wait until it breaks, right? As well as the human cost for folks who may be waiting, because HVAC only breaks when it's really, really hot or really, really cold. Those are the only time it seems like it breaks, and then your HVAC people are all somewhere else because somebody else broke first. So, you know, I think these are the kinds of pieces that challenge us to look forward and think hard. But I agree. We actually had a funny conversation about solar with McKinstry. What was it you told us, Doug, that?
Well, Tillamook PD, when I was on the board, they, a few years ago, put in a solar array, a pretty good one right down the street here. And at the end of 1 month, it generated enough electricity to run an electric toothbrush for, you know, half a day.
So solar's not high on the list.
That's progress.
So another alternative, which is less ideal, I think, in the long run, is on that same sheet, there's a table up top which does not upgrade the infrastructure. So what we just looked at is, if we're going to replace an HVAC system, we should probably do an improved model that's more energy efficient. That's what those costs are. If we wanted to go the cheaper route where they were like for like, these are those numbers, which we would not have grant opportunities available to us as much.
Did
And there's no
McKinsey
solar and
provide an ROI analysis on upgraded like HVAC?
We have not got there yet. So this was a facilities assessment, and they were not going to be presenting the results of the report until after budgets were submitted. And given the timing, I asked them to provide priorities so departments could start putting something in their budget. That's what this is. So all the departments that have a facility have this data for their departments, and I don't know what they're doing with it, but it's for them to decide how to use it. The next step is to hire McKinstry to do a deeper dive into just that. Yep.
Part of the issue, excuse me, again, from my perspective, is the county owns a lot of facilities. It leases others, and some are triple net leases and some aren't. And so, you know, you can't have just an overall practice of doing it, because as you'll hear, the departments provide for a lot of their own maintenance. And sometimes they're in a building that's triple net, and or others where they have to pay a bit more. And it is really quite a mix. So it's a challenge to say one size fits all, because it doesn't. But like I said, I think the McKinstry looking at this, well, they actually looked at every facility. They went out to parks, and I mean, they were looking at all those little teeny-weeny buildings all over the place. And, you know, this was the most comprehensive report I've seen in that kind of a long time. It really got into it. And then the next step, like Rachel says, is put the numbers and times and ROI and see where you go, and then figure out how to fund it. But as you probably already figured out, there are more asks than there are resources. Always. think what else you wanna do with this one?
I'm done for the day.
Okay.
Yay.
And the whole hearing, all the
There you go.
hearings. Until we get to
Okay,
Thursday afternoon, I'm sure.
As you can see, this lady's got her arms around a lot of stuff here, so.
What's that, 11 budgets you're responsible for? 14.
There was actually two more, but they're the concept grant.
Okay. Well, thank you.
So are we ready now for then Public Works? Okay, so we've got our Public Works Director. Why don't you introduce yourself? I will tell you also if he doesn't, he's a licensed professional engineer in addition to being a director. So go ahead and give us 2 minutes of your background for their benefit.
So, Chris Lady, I'm a professional engineer. Chris Lady, I'm a professional engineer, county engineer. Wear a variety of hats. I was a consultant for 19 years. And prior to that was surveying, consulting engineer for 19 years. And then I've been in this position for about 6.5 years. So one of the things that was asked of me was before lunch was the people wanted to see a hole in the ground. So a couple years back, or a little further back, we started putting together the budget slideshow, and usually I show a couple really cool pictures of things that we did. It was quite a busy year. I ended up doing a PowerPoint of 161 slides, so I reduced that significantly because this was a pretty large project, a pretty large year. We had a grant with the Forest Service. We did some work on Derrick's Road, Munson Creek. It's been on to us for a long, long time. Paved Sand Lake Road. That was
Full
a
screen,
mill.
Chris?
Say again?
Could we make your presentation full screen?
I am full screen on my end. I don't know if there's another way to do it on that end.
There we go. Thank you.
Oh, perfect.
That's a little better.
So Sand Lake Road, we milled and filled, so we ground an inch and a quarter off and replaced that with an inch and a quarter brand new asphalt. We do some paving not only in those main roads, but also on some of the smaller county roads. We maintain 7,000 signs across that. Some of our stop signs they have magnets attached to them and they attract vehicles. So, and vehicles are typically win the stop sign for. We have this is actually used, new to us. We've had it for several years. This was a used bucket truck from PUD. We do buy new, we buy old, we Frankenstein vehicles together, cannibalize parts from one truck to another. We have a fabulous mechanic group. We not only do potholes, but culverts. Flooding is obviously a concern. All this items came out of one culvert up in Bayside Gardens. So that is a ginormous vacuum cleaner, sucks things out of culverts. Hole in the ground. This is your hole in the ground. So this is on Sand Lake Road. People know in recent minds that we have this big slide that took place just north or Salvatierra Del Mar, North Pacific City. This is also on Sand Lake Road. That is a hole that's 30 feet deep. So we shut the road down for that one. You can see the excavator that's in the hole. It's got the yellow arm sticking up. That's as he's excavating down. We ended up restoring that road. So not only is the two new ones, we also had that. We also built Green Creek Bridge, Sampson Creek Bridge. This is Fairview and Huey. So this is a culvert that we thought was going to blow out. So we removed this a year ago. Over winter, we bypassed all the traffic on this onto Highway 6. And this last summer, we built that. All this is contract. When I said built, the contractors built it. 14-foot diameter is the size of that. This is on low water. The water level on December 6th was about halfway up that pipe. So it did carry a lot of water. We opened Cape Mears Loop Road in November of this last year. So that's a $22 million project. Our match was $2.2 million for that. Big Trout Bridge, you're going to be hearing that a little bit as we start getting into our budget uncertainty. So this is a 89-foot long box carts, 9 feet wide, 89 feet. The only thing that's holding that bridge up right now is basically that large tree. Crystal Creek, probably aware of that one. That's the one we did an emergency response on. Built that bridge in 10 days. ODOT and Federal Highway. This is this is a declared storm, presidentially declared storm. We should be receiving 100% reimbursement for the work that we did. This project and Dry Creek are tied together. Dry Creek, this one and Dry Creek were damaged from 2015. And again, this one is re-damaged. So likely, talking with ODOT and Federal Highway, ODOT will probably build the permanent solution in the summer of next summer, not this upcoming summer, but next summer. Sand Lake road slide. Again, this is halfway between Tierra Del Mar and Pacific City, 175 feet long. Took out one lane. We went through and restored one lane by putting in a soil nail wall. We can get in more detail if anybody wants outside of this. And then obviously flooding occurs throughout. So this was taken December of this last year. The storm events oftentimes will cause debris to jam up against bridges. This is the Beachy Bridge in Pacific City. I really like the photo on the left as we were trying to cut that route and get the river to help float that log out. So we have fabulous guys. January of this year is yet another presidentially declared disaster. In this particular case, the county road department didn't suffer too bad. PUD got hit fairly hard. So we'll be receiving about 60 grand in reimbursements for that storm. Fairly common. We're always out there cutting trees down, slides, mini slides, a lot of trees come down. We're pretty efficient with those. So those are the big hole in the ground. So we'll jump into the actual budget itself. So think of the road department. Road department comprises of many items. We have 368 miles of road. It's not just the roads. We have a lot of vegetation. We get 80. Actually, last calendar year, we received 88.2 inches of rain, which is actually average for last year. The summertime was low, but we did see a higher percentage of rain throughout the winter months. Vegetation, guardrail, equipment, pavement, culverts, ditches, bridges. We have the engineering department, the gravel roads, tide gates, levees, emergency response is a big part of us. We have a fair amount of buildings, stockpiles, etc. So ODOT manages 40,000 culverts across the entire state of Oregon. Tillamook County manages 4,000. So we manage 10% of the entire ODOT, what they manage. What are some of the things that drive our budget? So our budget is primarily, this is a comparison from last year to what we propose. In red, as you can see, we're primarily funded by the state motor vehicle fund. So people call it the gas tax. Our second primary driver is the transit lodging tax. That's 33% of our budget.
Make note of that. The second largest funder is the room tax that we talked about earlier this morning. So that's a pretty significant item. Just keep that in the back of your minds.
Yeah. So you won't see any property tax in here. It doesn't exist. So 1/3 of the entire budget is TLT. Half of it's the gas tax. So the gas tax is it's exactly what you think it is. It's your gas tax. It is your motor vehicle registration fees. It all comes down to where your vehicles are registered. So if your vehicle was if you are a second homeowner and you have a house here, yes, you're paying property tax in Tillamook County. But if your vehicle is registered in Multnomah County, that's where the gas tax money goes. So the gas tax is also based on, it's a cents per gallon. So as the higher gas goes up, people buy less gas, which means our revenue actually drops because people are not buying as many gallons of gas. So it's a little contrary to what we think. So all the gas tax all goes to ODOT. It doesn't matter where you buy your gas. You can buy your gas out in Hood River. All that money goes to ODOT. The taxes and fees, your motor vehicle registration fees, all goes to ODOT. ODOT takes 50% of that. 30% goes to county based on vehicles, and the other 20% go to cities. Now, when you look at the bottom and you take a look at Tillamook County, 40% of all property tax statements in Tillamook County go out of the county, which means 40% of those property taxes is they're not registered in the county. If they're not registered in the county, they don't have a permanent vehicle in the county. If they don't have a permanent vehicle in the county, the gas tax doesn't come here. It goes to someplace else. So essentially, very high level result in a potential 40% shortcoming in revenue. Fortunately, a lot of that is offset by the TOT. We'll talk about that a little bit more. Road department does not get state timber, we get federal timber. One of the problems with state timber is you can't sell the land, which will create homes, which is where vehicles, again, the road department perspective. Federal timber is where we get money from. We don't get state, we get federal, the road department. Common misperception is TLT is bonus money. In all reality, it's not truly bonus money. If you take a look, and this is the adjusted money till 2023. So we are seeing in 1990, $6 million was revenue coming in from the federal forest. Compare that to $500,000 today. So the $2 million that we have coming in from TLT is 1/3 of what we would see back in 1990, wage, adjusted, inflation adjusted. So it's not bonus money, it's not add-on money. I consider that replacement money for the lost revenue of federal forest. It's also filling the link into with all the homes that people don't have registered vehicles for. So TLT, 1/3 of our budget's a very significant driver. Storms, big player. We are currently operating under 4 declarations, 2015, 16, 23, and 24. There almost was a 2022 declaration, and that would have been significant for us. To claim a declaration, the state needed to claim $7.8 million. The state was able to come up with $7.4 million. So $400,000 short, and that emergency would have been declared. That declaration would have helped fund Big Trout Bridge. We'll talk about that in a little bit. $1.8 million could end up becoming $5 million with no money for that. So currently operating under 4 emergency storms. When you look at these things, they don't just, people see our initial response. We go out there, we get the trees, we open up the road, we slam in the bridge in 10 days, and off we go. 2015 event with Kilch's House, that storm project that's happening in the fairgrounds property should be done this summer. We're down to the final little hiccups with FEMA and archaeology, and I think we're ready to go. That brings in the ARPA money. Road department people, road department. It's all about roads. Obviously it's not, but we had actually, if you take a look at that center column, current PCI, pavement condition index, every 2 years we have a consultant come in and evaluate our roads. We were ranked the worst by far. Our PCI was 35 out of 100, 0 to 100, and we were at 35. We passed the bond. The bond has since expired, and then TLT has kind of risen to help offset it's continued to fund where the bond wasn't. Still not enough. We've brought that up to 57. If you look on the right, it says your agency percentile rank is 50%. So we're right smack dab in the middle of the counties for our road system. So pretty good. And you look at centerline miles, 264. That's the asphalt component of that. So on the top one, you can see it kind of gradually rising. It takes significant effort to move that needle slightly. It's done every 2 years, so 2021 is a calculated number. So every other one you'll see. So this summer, 2024, we'll have a new inspection. That helps to drive, where do we put our money? We operate 3 funds or manage 3 funds. That is 160 is our operating budget. All the money revenue goes into 160 and is distributed. 163 is dedicated specifically to pedestrians and bicycles. That is a mandate by the state. And 308 is our road construction grant projects, and I call that the Capital Improvement Fund. So 160 is that's where the money meets the road. Currently, if you take a look at the last 18 months, the maintenance equipment operators, they received, over the last 18 months, they received a 21% increase in pay. We've had a very difficult time finding people. We're back to where we think we're within market. So the 14 employees of those positions, the MEO study did a 10%. You throw in COLA on top of that. So big driver in our budget. So my slides are slightly different, although we'll get into the nuts and bolts of the geocodes. So just a quick overview, we don't know where we're going next year without knowing where we're at. So you'll be seeing my numbers that are tracking what is projected to be spent by the end of this fiscal year, tied to the adopted budget, tied to proposed budget. So we look at our current budget is 13.47 million, and our proposed budget is 12.19 million. So we anticipate on this screen, we'll get into this in quite a bit more detail. So there's kind of a nice little summary snapshot. Now, what you see on the far right was amount received and spent. We did get some funds that we did not anticipate, so that was great. We did not spend contingency or the unappropriated ending fund balance. I do tend to try to keep that unappropriated ending fund balance higher. TLT, again, a big part of our budget. So we went back, we received these on a quarter. This is what the road department has received. So each and every quarter, because it's very cyclical, you can anticipate or you can identify, some of the trends that are going on. So I look at it from a quarter by quarter by quarter basis, and then I've made a projection on what I estimate we're going to see in the fourth quarter. It's a little different approach than others. So my actual number in the budget is $2.03 million as revenue. Um, Sean and I have been very conservative in the past. Her and I have talked about this and feel this number is a little bit more appropriate. It is less than the TLT money that I think we saw in a previous Bud fund. What's I think you were about 2.25.
Conservative.
Yeah, I was just gonna.
I have 2,255,000.
Yep. So hopefully we get that. But if you take a look historically over to the far right, so I'm actually more conservative. But I'm conservative. I do have some background with Sean and I. We talked about this and say, yeah, this is pretty realistic. Again, conservative. So we see here, this is kind of on our revenue side. I'm just going to call out a couple line items in here. One of which is the State Motor Vehicle Fund. So everybody has probably heard that the ODOT is starting to hurt for their revenue. House Bill 2017 increased the motor vehicle registration fees for electric vehicles because they're not buying gas. If they're not buying gas, there is no gas tax. So they increased electric vehicle registration fees. Problem with that was it wasn't enough, and you start getting more and more fuel efficient vehicles are buying less gas. If your primary source of revenue is gas tax, and they're not buying as many gallons, then obviously the revenue drops. This is the first time where ODOT has basically flatlined their projections, and I've held it static from adopted budget to proposed budget. So it's the first time ever where that's a flat number. We were continuing to increase the beginning balance up to a point, and now we're starting to draw that back down. It will become unsustainable, and we'll get into a slide that really starts to talk about that. So that beginning balance will begin to drop. We allowed it to grow for a variety of reasons, one of which was to slow the impact of the paving. Once the bonds stopped, we wanted to continue to be able to pave. Until we had a full understanding of what that was. This also set the stage to start to grow the seed money for capital improvement projects, so the grant matching. So that's why the beginning balance was slowly allowed to accumulate over a period of time. So the other item that I want to point out, we talked about TLT. Those are really the big drivers that come in. So I know this one zoomed in pretty tight. I can't get this any larger on my screen, but this does match your spreadsheet. So it is the same exact thing as you see on a geocode in sequential order. It breaks it down. This one shows what I've spent, adopted, and proposed. So the far right is what I spent. The middle is what adopted and proposed is for this upcoming year. One of the biggest impacts to this is the wage study and the modifications for that. The road department, we felt the largest impact to that. That's from the engineering staff and from the maintenance operator. So a couple big drivers. We were by far the department that got hit the hardest with that. So you'll see throughout this the administrative personnel salaries, the salaries for all employees change. I want to point out a couple of the line items this year with under contracted services. This is where our HR investigations go through. I had a couple of things that were rightfully so, went through investigations, come to a resolution. And then the other big item that we see here is administrative transfer to the general fund. So again, we are not general fund. So we transfer money from the road department to the general fund to pay for all kinds of things, including, time spent with the board, Sean's time, HR's time, legal, all that stuff comes out of this.
That's the indirect cost that we
That's the
talked
indirect
about first thing this morning, and that applies to all the non-general fund.
Right. So by law, 1% of the motor vehicle fund, the gas tax, the highway trust fund. So the gas tax, 1% of that has to go towards ped bike. So it's got its own separate line item. So it's 2.9 million. I just said 30,000. That gets transferred over to Fund 163. Fund 308 is where our capital projects are at. Last year, we adopted under the current fiscal year, we transferred over $1.8 million, and we proposed to transfer $1.1 million over there. And we'll talk a lot about, those items. Operating contingency, we're keeping that static at 800,000. We also have a contingency under Fund 308. Looking at time, we'll possibly speed this up a little bit. Administrative maintenance salaries, if you notice, we're fairly flatline with that compared to the adopted, because I don't plan on refilling one of the seats. It was actually not occupied anyways, and we've been functioning fine without. That offsets the increase of salaries. We haven't filled that position anyways. Seems like it works out pretty good. Asphalt quantities drop significantly. It goes from 1.5 million to 750,000. That is the asphalt we purchase and the county puts on the ground. Let's see the other items. We started lowering the vehicles and machinery and equipment. We've been very aggressive in trying to roll over our rolling stock. Our oldest vehicle right now, I believe, is a 1972 forklift, somewhere about that age. And we have some very old loaders, but these are machines that just won't die. And why kill them off if they still keep breathing? Contracted paving. So last summer we spent 323,000 contract paving. We were getting really good costs. There are some times where it makes more sense to hire private. Sometimes it makes sense to go public. This particular case, it was actually, we're getting good prices, so we're going to continue doing contract paving. $250,000 for contract and $750,000 for us to put in work. Materials and service, I'm going to go to 116 double 4, which is shop personnel. One of the biggest things that comes into here, this is where we spend our fuel out of. So we thought we were very conservative in our estimate last year. It turns out we weren't too far off the mark. We kept that number consistent. Equipment is, we've pretty much, so the gas and the diesel really weren't too bad of a hit, but we started seeing all the markups on the maintenance equipment that we work through. So we will have spent 280,000 over what we anticipated at 180,000. There's a variety of reasons for that. We don't think we're going to spend that much. We dropped it down to 230, which is still 50,000 over where we were last year. Okay, I'm just kind of watching time and trying to find some things that are relevant. So on this isn't in your, unless you printed a copy of the PowerPoint. Okay. So 160 on the summary, if you take a look, is again where people care about asphalt. So you'll start to see the fiscal year 23-24, which is what we're currently at right there. Asphalt, 21% of our entire budget went to asphalt, 23% went to capital projects. This upcoming year, it's reduced down to 16% to asphalt, 18% towards capital improvements. So that number's beginning to drop down. If you start coming back up to 21-22, we are still under the bond. 22-23, we're on the back end of the bond. It closed out. Overall health, and this is where I wanted to kind of flag it. Let's put this out of the way. This is where we start looking at sustainability. So if you forget the fact that we have a beginning balance, you're only looking at revenue and you're only looking at expenses, is we end up being revenue minus expenses short $1.9 million. So almost $2 million is our off from our revenue versus our expenses under our current. So you strike out the money that would transfer over to 308, get rid of the capital improvements project entirely. If you get rid of that, then you're down to 886,000 in the hole. Strike out the entire asphalt budget, and at that point we become whole. So a couple things that we are doing to offset that is still being fairly aggressive and going after funds. We're pretty much matched to death on what we can afford as far as bringing on new capital projects. We've been doing. We're very successful on that, possibly too successful. So there are other options that we are looking at exploring in there as far as long term. How do we fund that gap? And if you take a look at TLT, TLT is literally funding the capital projects and the asphalt. So that $2 million is really what we're short to be whole. So that's very, very significant. It doesn't fund that either. So I got to switch back to here. Ped Bike we talked about because it takes $30,000 every year. It takes a while to come up with a good project. We heard earlier about a TLT request for Short Beach at $85,000. The TLT money is that request previously. You also have this road department, the county Ped Bike Fund, $75,000. This trail was posted as being closed. It was a very dangerous trail. Significant support for this. It really does need to be done. So whether the TLT money is adopted or not, we'll still put $75,000 into it. We just may not be able to build anything. So this was a trail we had closed. It's currently posted as enter at your own risk, and it does get a lot of pedestrian. And it is located about halfway between the Oceanside and the lighthouse at Cape Mears. Big money. So a lot of details there, and this is posted on that drive. So a lot of flexibility that goes through here. This is what funded the emergency relief for Federal Highway for Crystal Creek and Sand Lake Road. We anticipate that money coming in. We're able to fund both of those two projects out of this. Our refunds and reimbursements that we anticipate receiving over this next fiscal year was $3.6 million. That would be what we receive coming back. So this is really primarily set up that if we have a matching funds for something else, such as all the FEMA projects, the federal highway projects, the NOAA money, the ODOT projects, this is our match goes into this for multi-year programs. So anticipated budget, we go out to summer of 24, summer of 25. It actually continues on all the way out to 27. So quite a bit there. We also have maintenance projects for some of our bridges, Sloan Creek, Prospect Creek on Sand Lake, or excuse me, on Slab Creek. A couple of bridges down there that need some work to be done with it. Machinery and equipment, this one's fairly unique, $44,000. This is tied to ARPA, and this is tied to Office of Emergency Management. With all three of those funds together, we're looking at purchasing a modular bridge that can be adjusted from every 10-foot increment up to 80 feet. County road match is $44,000. The intent of the ARPA was for emergency beams, so it matches that criteria. Didn't think we were going to be able to do that. Actually, earlier I thought it's like, no, you can take your money back, and then OEM stepped in and said, hey, we can help you out with that. So we're like, all right. Use the same money that was already dedicated for ARPA, and we bring in $44,000. So pretty good deal. The biggest thing when we start looking at this, and there's a lot of detail with it, and being conscious of the time we can go back and ask questions, is this very last sheet where we sit there and say, a big trout bridge, $1.8 million. That's the one that was a rail car. $1.8 million to essentially remove the bridge, put in a temporary bridge, remove all the houses, and build remove the existing bridge and remove the temporary bridge. $1.8 million. We went to ODOT. went to the state legislature session. Representative Javity was knocking on the doors. We had a lot of help trying to get the money. ODOT did not want to participate with that. They would pay for a temporary bridge, the removal of the old bridge, and the removal of the temporary bridge. It doesn't do us a lot of good because now you still have people out there. So they asked me, said, Chris, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to turn around and ask for a $4.8 million to build 2 bridges to get to that same piece of property. So we are actually looking at another option that we'll present to them. Their programs are set to build bridges. They're not set to remove bridges. So it was about the language on how that was written. So I asked them to explore modifying their language because from a cost-effective use of taxpayer dollars, 1.8 million is a heck of a lot cheaper than 4.8 million. It seemed like a no-brainer to me. But the language of that is there. So
You have a picture of that one?
yeah, so I'll put that one back up here really quick.
This is kind of a big deal because if you want government to behave like rational people, and I'm talking about the state of Oregon in this case, not all of us here in this room. You know, they're more interested, it seems, to spend 4.8 million because that's what's in a particular program, as compared with what the real number is under 2 million to solve the problem perfectly. So go and explain what's going on there. I think this is something that I'd like for these people to understand.
Sure. So this is off Highway 22 in the Big Trout, Three Rivers, Big Trout Salmon Drive. It is it's actually part of the Three River, the River Ranch. It's their own road district. Their money goes into pay for their roads. Very unique situation. Except for the bridge. And this particular bridge is county-owned, county-maintained. It was built in 1994. It was a used bridge rail car that was put in back in 94. At that point, the river was in a different location, and it was spanning a much smaller channel. Over time, the river has migrated from a main channel to the side channel, and is now, if you look at historic photos, that area, which is more or less an island, had 4 homes back there, 2 of which are gone. The river now occupies the space where one of the homes were. So 2 of the 4 are gone. The river is where one of the houses were. There's 2 remaining homes back there. By whatever we do with this bridge, either take it out or come in from a new one, there's a high likelihood that one of those homes is going to be taken out. The river will take it out. Without significant shoreline armoring, bank armoring to control the river, which, you know, maybe you can do for a little amount of time, but this is a wild, crazy river that wants to do what it wants to do. You can't control Mother Nature as much as you would like. So the river continues to migrate. It moves back there. If you look historic over eons, this river has constantly always been doing this. It hits this valley floor and just in this area, splinters, call it threads. It threads all throughout there, multi-threads. The river is now moved. The bridge is no longer basically trying to span 30 feet. It's now trying to span 100 feet. And the 89-foot structure just doesn't cut it. So we actually had grant money from ODOT, so it's not so much grant, but it's formulaic money to design a replacement for this bridge before the river moved. Got up to 60%. Not this last winter, but the winter before, we went out there in an emergency situation and shored up the far side, put a bunch of rock under it, and it was literally inches from falling into the river. Put a lot of ripraps of big rock underneath that. We had concern that that would not make it through this upcoming winter. So over last summer, we removed some of the rock and put a dead man system. So basically big concrete blocks we put in there and cabled them up to the bridge and then covered that with rock. So just in case a tree might decide to hit it, knock it off and let that bridge float downstream, block the river and cause all kinds of other damage. And you can see that's exactly what happened. There's a tree that's holding this bridge up. Gotta find my cursor again. Somewhere in there. So under its current configuration, the side that's on the far left is actually really stable. It is held down with concrete blocks cabled to this steel bridge. The right side, probably about 10% of that bridge is actually resting on ground. The tree is what's holding us up. We've suggested that they evacuate, and decide that the whole place, the two residents that are back there, there's three residents, but they occupy two homes. They are walking across the bridge. One drives a golf cart across the bridge. The issue with this is really, what can we get away with as far as operating within permits and things of that nature, and to shore this up. A lot of different ways to do this, and we've explored many options. We brought in a couple different people to take a look at that. If we can't get funding for it, one of the things that we're going to probably do this upcoming summer is to get permission to crawl an excavator to the far side. Possibly, it'll probably require a little bridge to go. We'll be crawling across the sandbar, a little bridge to go over the channel. It really drops quite a bit during the summer, and then start armoring up and shoring that side of the bridge to the right. That would maintain access until we come up with a good solution. So even if we had design money available and we started design for whatever outcome is, it's still probably going to be built in 28, 29. Just because of the process you go through with ODOT, with the federal highway, all the nuances it takes to go through that. So one of the things when we start going down that path, it does get to be a lot more challenging. It does end up being, ultimately quite a bit more expensive. And if you take a look at what we did on Crystal Creek, that was $800,000, and we did it in 10 days. It still has a lot of work to go with it. But it's usable. It's usable for an extended period of time, but there's still more work to be done with that. But there's quite a bit of a difference between a 60-foot bridge and a 90-foot bridge. We're miles apart in complexity. Then how do you even get a structure this big down there? It gets to be challenged. It's not impossible. This one made it down there, but by the time you start looking at some of the restrictions that we have to go through permitting and things of that nature, it does make it a lot more challenging. And the river's moving, and it will continue to move. And at some point, it will take this bridge out if we don't stop it. So we've been after money. We have not been able to get the money for it yet. So, which is to kind of wrap up with that.
Yeah, I wanted him to point that out as really a pretty good example of what we face in Tillamook County. Because we have 9 rivers and I don't know how many little creeks, tributaries, and they all meander, and they all sooner or later affect homes and properties and people's lives. This one, we're talking about millions and millions of dollars for 2 homes. And you have to provide a road to those 2 homes under Oregon law, right, Chris?
Right.
And so that's the dilemma. How much money do you spend and how do you get it and where do you get it? And what do you do and what's the least expensive solution? What's the right thing to do legally, morally, ethically? I mean, you got families that are living there. I mean, this is a dilemma. And you wouldn't think about that, but this occupies time and energy and money and expertise. And fortunately, we've got this guy here, but it's a big deal. This is a multi-million-dollar impact to some organizations, maybe Tillamook County.
So back to the money, when you look at proposed budget 24-25, I've got $1.8 million in there because I don't know what's going to happen next winter. So we budgeted for the full buyout. The problem with that is that when you look at fiscal year 25-26, that puts me in the hole by $931,000 of where I need to be. On top of that, that's also transferring over $1.1 million. And then in the summer of 27 will be Atkinson and Prince Bridge, and that is $600,000, which would be our match for ODOT, those budgets. So Big Trout plays a significant role in this fund. So it's that, but it takes away money from everything else. When you look at Green Creek, we built that with county match at $150,000. We built Sampson with county match at $150,000. Built 2 bridges for $300,000 on Trask River Road. Great use of money. $1.8 million for a bridge to 2 homes. That's better off removing the bridge and buying them out. And yeah, it's difficult. Anyways, moving on. I've been watching the clock, trying not to throw everybody too far off. So our operations administration, it's myself, administrative specialist in the accounting. We run a lot of bills, pay a lot of things. We put all the documentation and submit them to the treasurer's department, and treasurer, puts a lot out. So we run so many, we have our own person that puts together all the vouchers, which attaches the invoice. On the engineering side, Ron Newton retires on May 31st, and we brought in an engineering project manager. So the engineering staff numbers actually stay the same, but we end up with three, we stay static at three. The shop, we have three mechanics, and our operations superintendent is there. Chris Lawfulmaker retires in September. So that'll be a big hit. So our number two operations superintendent retires in September, and really our senior engineering tech retires in May. So pretty significant at the upper level. On the operations side, we operate one crew to the north, one crew to the south, a total of 15, counting the two foremen. And that is including not replacing one of the, we're not going to replace one of the MEOs, so we'll actually end up with a total of 15, a grand total of 25. I think there's a number mistyped in there. So grand total of 25 if I'm fully staffed. And currently, we're pretty doggone close to being fully staffed, which is the first time in a long, long time that that's happened. That is it. I tried not to spend too much time on any one item simply because I could talk for 2 days on this nonstop and still not cover everything as most all these departments could, I'm sure.
And he could too. One thing to point out, and then we'll take some questions. For some of you have been around a while, but it wasn't too many years, well, maybe it was quite a while, probably 30 years plus. There used to be like 50 people in this department. And the county had its own rock quarry and I think even did some of its own asphalt at one time.
We had our own asphalt plant, our own rock crushing operations.
Well, all of that, and then, you get river rock, which you can't do anymore. And so things have gone this way, and staffing is basically 50% of what it was some years ago. And so and yet there are more people and more roads and more difficult circumstances, yet you have fewer assets to deal with it. So, I mean, that's reality, and you do what you have to do, and the demands have changed, but it's, he's got a pretty tough job.
And the reason for that is the loss of federal timber.
Yes, thank you. Yes, who else wants to ask questions, please?
I would ask a question, Mr. Chair. Mr. Lady, your indirect cost allocation is up about 20%.
That is a formulaic, I'll let Sean speak to that.
For that is the property and general liability insurance that's going up 15 to 20%. So that gets across the board, that was a big piece of it.
Chris, can you talk about the road bond timeline? Because now we have expended everything related to the bond. We've not yet paid that all back. Are you looking to the future? Should we be looking to the future for a road bond? And if so, when should we be looking at that? To Michael's point earlier about why don't we bond for it? When would we bond for it? What, with road?
This is so the road department has the County Roadway Advisory Committee is it's a group of it's farmers, fire department, local people that help to identify and kind of steer us in the right direction. This has been a topic that's been raised a number of times. So we had a bond, we spent the bond, but it is now you spent the money, but now you got to pay for the bond, and I think that ends up in 2028. 29. So 29 is when that expires. So the desire is that to time it so that you don't actually raise your taxes, but you don't see a loss in taxes. So the timing for, going after the bond is by the time you start prepping it and things of that nature is going to be, it's not too far out before we actually start pushing forward on that. But if you get done paying that bond in 29 without increasing your taxes or doubling your taxes for the road, one of the things that's a little misunderstanding when people look at their tax statement, they see road district or transportation district as you look on your tax statements. That's the bus. that's the wave, that's not the road department.
Yeah.
So the road department bond is actually tied under the larger component of the county bonds, is when you look at your tax statements. So I get that's another commonly misunderstood, I get questions on all the time.
So we would want to do it in 29 because it pays off in 29, and then you have to get the approval, you got to actually sell the bonds, you got to go through the whole process, so it's right in that.
Right, so it'd be probably in that time frame 28, and now I'm kind of speaking off the cuff.
Yeah.
28 with it to be in place so that you don't skip a beat on paying your
Okay.
taxes. Not asking to raise anybody's taxes,
Sure.
but just to keep the consistency flowing.
But the
And it would
value,
need to be
property
pretty much
values
the
are
same.
considerably higher now than they were then. The road bond he's talking about was issued, I want to say 15 years ago. Well, it was issued the same time as part of a package that included the TLT. And the first half, and some of you might remember it, you two for sure. What the voters were told was there would be a road bond, it would be $15 million, and it would be split in two separate issues to avoid arbitrage issues. And that's what happened. They passed it, the second half being that if we get the voters, the property owners to pay their share of fixing up the roads, which at the times were 36 out of 36 counties, then it passed. And the second part then would be the TLT, where we'd ask the visitors to pick up some of the cost as well. Understanding that the road bond to start with, 40% of the people who live out of the county are going to pay it on their property taxes. So that's where the 15 million came from in two different segments. And that now has been exhausted. The money is gone, but the debt remains until 29, you said, right? And then the other flip side of that is the TLT. So that's how this whole road thing came together about 10, 11 years ago.
So
And
Chris-
it's time to look at it again, at least
Yeah.
the TLT as we're talking about.
Well, and with that in mind, if I understood correctly, you were using the bond to do paving and other things, and you were putting other money away at the same time, and now you're using that money so that we don't just have to come to a crashing halt,
Correct.
right? So we're sitting here in 24 with the idea that perhaps we would go for a bond in 28. With what you have saved, how many years do you go before we stop? Do you get to that bond, or do you just have a couple of?
Yeah, it's when you start projecting out to the future, so it's at some point TLT hits its threshold, right?
Yeah.
And maybe we're there right now. It's a little bit of uncertainty when you start looking at the short-term rental caps that are in place. Do you already max that out? Are we there? It's a bit of an uncertainty. ODOT they're trying to work through some bills,
Sure.
or the intent is to work through some bills to offset some of that operating fund. And I know, Commissioner, you sit on the Northwest Advisory, and what is your?
I actually sit on the Association of Oregon Counties Transportation and Community Development Committee, and so
Thank you.
yes, we heard from OTC, Oregon Transportation Commission Chair. So we're working with ODOT to try to see where they're going. They're very
Right.
clear that their budget is shy on maintenance. And because we're in the 50-30-20 split with them, we are hopeful that whatever funding solutions they decide that they want to move forward for ODOT, they will include us. And that's our goal at our committee, is to just continue to be at the table and reminding them that it's a system of roadways, that none of us stand alone. So we're hopeful, but, we don't know.
Right, so realistically, what we'll see, if TLT is capped and doesn't increase anymore, and we start to see that the gas tax, again, it's not just gas tax, but if you take a look at the Highway Trust Fund, and if that doesn't, it stays flat or drops, which it very well could do, it's the mechanism in place that we have will be delay of service for these capital projects. And right now, we've got two that we're probably going to delay unless Big Truck comes to fruition. And that would be bridges that would be built in 26. We've kind of shifted to 27 to get the numbers to play right. You could see, a drop in that. It would be a drop in the amount of asphalt that gets put in. The next step would be starting to look at, reductions into the labor force again. Obviously, we don't want to do that, but if our primary revenues, which is our gas tax, starts to drop, right now it's flatlined, so that its trajectory is in the wrong direction, and TLT is capped, we're not going to grow any more than it's currently not sustainable as it is. That's what that one slideshow was in there. So we started ratcheting that down for last summer, $1.8 million. This summer, we really ratcheted that down quite a bit.
Okay, so that's something we're all looking to the future for is can we get to the next road bond with whatever ODOT decides to do and what state funding comes? Because they're looking at road usage charge, they're looking at a variety of things. But we need to keep an eye on that as we look at this budget going forward.
Right, so ODOT drives a lot of our budget. Those discussions that you're in, I don't know I know that you're in those discussions frequently, but those discussions that you get to be instrumental in really drive not just the state, but it drives the revenue stream for counties and cities too. They take 20% of that cut, so projections into the future are as good as they are today, and 2 minutes from now they're different.
Thank you, Chris. Great presentation, and congratulations on a huge body of work accomplished just this year.
Thank you. It was a busy summer. I thought we were going to put a couple pretty pictures in there. And the more I realized it, it's like 161 slides later. It's like, I don't really want to cut any more slides out. So it was a good dog and pony show that I presented to the commissioners a couple weeks back.
Well, as you all can see, this is a complex budget. There's a lot of work going on there, and there's a great deal of uncertainty. And so, welcome to county government.
And I'm glad we concentrated a little bit on the Big Trout Bridge issue because it really is a conundrum. It's a
Stuck on that.
yeah,
Two
it's a,
houses and $9 million.
right. It's a huge responsibility, and if you think about the percentage of Chris's budget that takes up for 2 households, good grief. And yet, obviously, we're responsible to those people, and we care about them, and it's their home. So we're glad you're gonna get to weigh in on this problem so that it isn't entirely on us three. Because it's hard to know what to do about it.
Horrible decision to be made.
Well, if you got them all, you hit your 3 funds.
That was all 3, yes.
Okay. Any other questions for Chris? As you can see, he's a good man to have on the staff. So I think we're pretty fortunate, and I remember lots of we've had some other really good people in that chair as well, but Chris is a good one. He's logical and he's professionally certified, and he's given us something to think about here for sure.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank you,
thank you, Chris. All right, let's see if we can do juvenile, and then we'll take a short break before we end up then with the courts and the DA for today. So come on up, Matt.
Good afternoon, rather.
This is gonna be far less interesting.
No pictures of holes in the road.
Would you identify yourself and what you do in your background a little bit for these folks?
I'm Matt Cannell, I'm the juvenile department director. I've worked for Tillamook County since February of 2000 in the juvenile department. I started out as a probation officer, and then fast forward to the beginning of COVID, our director at that time left, and I was, I guess, placed into a lead worker capacity, and then in mid-2021, I became the department head. So, and prior to that, I worked for the bulk of my career has been here in Florida. And that's about it, unless anybody's got any questions. I'm going to start out with a little something about what county juvenile departments do, and this is right out of ORS 419C, and this is very broad brush of what the juvenile departments do. The Legislative Assembly declares that in delinquency cases, the purposes of the Oregon juvenile justice system from apprehension forward are to protect the public and reduce juvenile delinquency and provide fair and impartial procedures for the initiation, adjudication, and disposition of allegations of delinquent conduct. The system is founded on the principles of personal accountability and reformation within the context of public safety and restitution to the victims and to the community. And I guess I'll just jump right into it. I mean, what you've got in front of you is probably one of the county's more simple, smaller, and straightforward budgets. You know, county juvenile departments are in the people business, and so that's our largest department. This is our personnel costs. Myself and two of our other staff members, our two legal assistants, are all longtime county employees. And our two probation officers are newer county employees. And beyond personnel, our other big costs, our other big budget line items are our detention contract with Yamhill County and our contracted services. And we are entirely a general fund department. We do get a small amount of grant money from two different state agencies, the Oregon Youth Authority and Department of Education. There's a division of the Department of Education called the Youth Development Division. And those funds are the juvenile crime prevention funds that I believe were passed under Governor Kitzhaber in the mid-90s. And those funds are dispersed based on county populations and other factors in their juvenile delinquency populations. We don't have, I think our budget has been pretty consistent over the years. I have one of my predecessors to thank for making it simple and keeping it simple. And, you know, I think we do quite a bit with relatively little when compared to, you know, the previous department that gave their budget presentation. That's my notes. Let's see. I don't think I have any significant notable increases other than personnel and the cost of the detention contract, and I'm happy to answer questions about any of that.
Questions for Matt? Well, by way of context, then, could you tell us approximately how many youth do you serve in a typical 12-month year?
Oh, so since beginning of 2020, which also coincided with ballot measure 110, all our referral numbers are way down. I think the last time I pulled the 12-month number we had, this was for our grant planning, I think we had about 67 individual youth that had been referred for 70 or 80 some offenses. Previously the numbers have been much higher. With ballot measure 110, all county juvenile department referrals pretty much dropped off a cliff in some places and really went down in others. Coming in September with the passage of House Bill 4002, which was a partial rollback of ballot measure 110, I would expect referral numbers to go back up. Since law enforcement is going to be able to re-engage and issue citations and generate referrals for what historically we've been able to do a lot with and engage with kids who get referred for substance possession. So I'm expecting a sharp uptick when following that law going into effect.
You say it's sharp uptick, do you have, and I know it's just a wild guess, but do you have any idea of what percentage increase that could be? And have you
That's a
taken
really
that?
good question. I think it could be maybe a third more than we've seen. You know, that's just a guess on my part. I honestly don't know. The other piece of that is that legislation has a deflection system sketched out for adult offenders that come into contact with law enforcement for that. Individual counties are deciding, you know, in discussions right now to see if they have the capacity and the resources to put something like that in place for the adult populations that law enforcement's going to be re-engaging with. Does that answer your question? I feel like I didn't do a good job of answering.
I don't know if there is a good answer to that until we're in the middle of knowing realistically what those numbers are, but no, thank you for that.
What is your age range?
Generally speaking, about age 12 to 17. There are some limited things we can do with kids younger than 12, and then we can, if it's a court case that's resulted in a kid being put on probation, we can supervise past age 17. I believe the statutory maximum for somebody being on juvenile probation is age 21 for a misdemeanor offense and age 23 for a felony offense.
No
Anything else?
questions? No, thank you, Matt, for all that you do. I know it's a lot of it's the social worky part again. You know, you're trying to intervene with our young people before they get really deep into our criminal justice system, and it's important work. So we appreciate what you and your staff do.
Well, it's a weird space to look at because we wear different hats. There's a court piece, there's a social work piece, like you said, and then there's the the accountability piece. You're the person that shows up when people aren't behaving themselves. So it can be a delicate balancing act.
Sure.
Well, I'll ask one question. And I was thinking about this the other day when we were visiting. What's Tillamook County's ratio of staff to clients, I guess we'd call them, compared maybe with some other counties? In other words, are we understaffed or overstaffed or about the same, or can you say?
I would say we're adequately staffed. 5 people is about minimum staffing level that we need. Right at this moment in time, our numbers are pretty low. And so, I mean, that's just a snapshot of a moment in time, but we're, historically, we are, when I first started, we had 3 full-time probation officers, 1 kind of a juvenile probation officer assistant, 2 clerical people, and a department director. So we are, we have fewer staff than we did, 20 odd years ago when I first started. But the business has changed and the demands have changed and the expectations have changed with that.
So if your prediction comes true, where it goes up by a third, would you need some more staff quickly or over? In other words, when the change to Measure 110 is effective this fall, would by January, February, March, and the same fiscal year we're talking about, would you come calling for another staff person?
I think it would probably have to go pretty well beyond a third increase before I would ask for another position. So
Because we didn't reduce when the numbers went down as a
Yes,
result of
indeed.
110.
Thank you. That's good point. Good point.
So we're ready.
Yeah.
So to speak.
Thank you, Matt.
All right, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Okay, as I said, I think we better take 5 to 7 and take a short break, and then we'll finish up today with the official people who send them over to the previous visitor.
The referrers.
Yeah, the referrers.
Yeah.
Still think you want to do this?
Well.
Okay, we ready? Ready, Dabby?
Yes,
we are. Okay, Tillamook County Budget Committee back in session. We have 2 left, and maybe we'll get out of here almost on time. So, Judge, you're up next. Please go ahead and identify your associate there, if you would.
Judge Ryan Cannell, Tillamook County Justice Court. This is Jackie.
There you go, thank you.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Judge Ryan Cannell, Tillamook County Justice Court. This is Jackie Rogers. She's my trial court administrator. So, hi, everyone. Going to kind of just run through our numbers. I know a lot of you guys have heard the presentation before, fairly similar to ones I've given in previous years, just thought I'd give everyone kind of an update on what we're doing, how we're doing. So last year, we saw starting in January, a fairly significant increase in tickets. And that was with the city police reconstituting their traffic enforcement team. That has continued on. And so we've seen not substantial increases in tickets in the last fiscal year. They have been fairly steady, and I'll go over some numbers here in just a little bit. One of the things that I pulled this year that I thought people might be interested in, and something I haven't pulled from previous years, was, and I did calendar year just because it's easier on our system to pull calendar year information, but I pulled all of our citations from 2023 just to see how many we had, what happened to them, how they proceeded through our system. And so in 2023, we had 5,955 citations filed. Out of those, 247 went to trial. So, and those are actually went to trial cases. So we held just under 250 trials. 3,277 entered no contest pleas. There's a couple of different ways you can enter no contest pleas. That would be done either through just, when you get a citation, if you just pay it off, that's no contest plea. If you come to court, plead no contest, and then ask the judge for a reduction, also counts as a no contest plea. If you work out an agreement with the state or a deal with the state, then you can change your plea to no contest before trial. And so that incorporates all of those. We dismissed 1,121 cases. There's a couple of different ways dismissals can happen. The vast majority of them are through our Fix-It Ticket program. Headlights busted, you get your headlight fixed, case gets dismissed. And we're pretty aggressive using that to clear tickets for people. Also, and that would be the vast, vast majority. It would also count as a dismissal if there were technical violations, not technical violations with the violations, technical mistakes on the citation. For example, if someone entered in a statute that doesn't exist, if it has made it through where that was missed in our initial rundown of the case when we first received it, if it's caught there, we just reject the ticket. And so we don't have a dismissal on that. If it's gotten through there and then there are fatal flaws in it that we see later, then we can dismiss the ticket. Out of this, I'd say 99% of it would be Fix-It tickets. The other way is generally a motion to dismiss from the state if they have worked out some kind of deal. This doesn't include or doesn't separate different violations on the same ticket. So if someone got a speeding and failed to carry proof of insurance, they provide insurance, it gets dismissed. The speeding ticket would then remain, so they're considered separately. And when I talk about citations, each charge constitutes a different, so I say citation shorthand, it's a charge on a complaint, which is part of a citation, but it's separate charges. We also had 1,310 people fail to appear. That the majority of those would be failures to appear at the arraignment. However, this also includes people who fail to appear at trial. When someone fails to appear, and I'm going to say generally because what happens can vary a bit. If it's a failure to appear at arraignment, we generally give people 2 to 3 weeks to contact the court. If we don't hear from someone in 2 to 3 weeks, and depending on how busy we are, it could be more, could be less. Then we issue a license suspension and enter a conviction. People who fail to appear at trials, generally we just issue the license and suspension at that point. And of the failed to appears, probably 99% would be at arraignments. So that's what we did last year for violations. That's not counting FEDs or small claims. So our current overall numbers is right now we have, and these numbers are current as of the end of last month, so they're about a week old. We have received 3,705 citations. That is a 7.7% decrease from same time last year, where we had 4,031. We have received 85 small claims, which is a 19.7% increase from last year, where we had 71 year to date. We've received 55 FEDs, which is a decrease. FEDs are evictions. Okay. Forcible entry and unlawful detainer. It's what people would think of as an eviction. Those are down 26.7%. We've received 55, down from 75 last year. The total funds we've brought in to date is $463,131.15. That is a 0.5% increase over last year, which was year to date $460,822.46. Specific funds for the county general fund, we're at $227,384.97, which is a 1.9% decrease from last year, where we were at $231,868.91. Our accounts receivable, before I get asked, we currently have $5,243,737.58 in accounts receivable. This is a year-to-date increase of 9%, and we currently have 12,447 cases in arrears. That's a 3.3% increase year-to-date last year.
What constitutes in arrears? Is it 60 days, 90 days, or?
We break them down into 0 to 30, 30 to 60, 60 to 1/8. Where's it 60? I have it right here. I can just look at it. So we do 0 to 90, 91 to 180, 180 to 365, and then over 365 is how we do our breakdowns. In our 0 to 90 column right now, we're at $74,120. That's a 14.3 decrease from the same time last year. 91 to 180 days is 165. We'll call it 166,000, fairly close. That's a 9.6% increase. 180 to 365, we're at touch over 315,000. That's a 29.4% increase. And then over 365 days is 4,256,000 and change, which is a 7.8% increase.
Unpaid fines.
Unpaid fines, yes.
Yeah. Well, keep talking. When we're done, I'm going to ask you, what are you going to do about it?
Nothing. There's not a whole lot I can do. We've lost our ability to suspend licenses for people not paying fines. This year, the legislature had a bill to when someone fails to appear, the suspension of their driving privileges is mandatory. Statute is a court shall suspend. This legislative session, there was a bill to amend that to the court may suspend. And one of the big backers of that was the city of Beaverton and the Beaverton Municipal Court. The reason they're starting to push that now is because in the next legislative session, we are predicting there's going to be a bill to remove the ability to suspend for failure to appears, like they removed the ability to suspend for non-payment of fines. That was an attempt to head that off at the pass before the next bill got through. That failed, so we are predicting within the next 2 years we won't be able to suspend licenses for failure to appears. We send the case off to collections. The collection agency under statute has very limited options in what they can do in collecting fees and fines from courts, and that's kind of it. So until there's a law change, to answer your question, not a whole lot. Wait till it hits 20 years and then the judgment terminates.
What group is behind this weakening of the process?
There are a couple. The big one right now is the Oregon Law Center. They're the main pusher of a lot of this legislation. It's all over the place. They're the ones who get. I'm also on the Justice Court Legislative Committee and the Municipal Justice Court Combined Legislative Committee, so I get to spend a lot of time seeing how the sausage is made and losing faith in humanity. So there is a broad set of different groups that have been talking about this. The big thing that is killing a lot of these bills is the Oregon legislature basically works on, as I'm sure you guys know, works on a gut and stuff method at this point. You announce bills, they're holder bills. You'll do 6 or 7 bills that all do the same thing and have the exact same words in them. But what matters is that it says relates to transportation. And then just before the vote, they amend the bills to take everything out and add in what they really wanted the whole time, generally the day before the vote. And as long as it relates to for transportation, they can do that.
I think you're too young to be so cynical.
I have a lot of responses to that, and I will withhold all of them. So, yes, the thing that's really been killing these bills, because there are these bills coming pretty much every session, is that there's a broad coalition to remove this suspend requirement, but they don't agree on anything else. And so when you're, gutting and stuffing a bill and you're going to throw in 500 or 600 pages of stuff, the removing the driver's license suspension is generally a footnote. And so what keeps killing these bills is that no one can agree on all the other stuff that they shove in, and so the bill dies. But there is a growing concerted effort to get this removed with our the last run through with the removing the mandatory language and making it permissive. The only thing that killed that was the other stuff in the bill. There's a broad coalition of support for that. They just can't agree on anything else.
Well, it's fascinating. It makes you wonder Do Oregonians in general know that there are no teeth to these laws, that they just don't actually have to do anything?
I'm not telling them.
Well, we just did.
No, right.
Sorry, just kidding. We just did.
And I'll say I don't know if that's a good idea or a bad idea. Beaverton Municipal Court a couple years ago stopped doing suspensions entirely. They didn't see a big drop in revenue. I don't know why they didn't, but they didn't. They recently started back up again because someone pointed out that it's a shall, not a may. It's not permissive, it's mandatory. They haven't seen that big of a change. Other courts, when they've done this, have seen significant. You guys remember back when the failure to comply suspension got removed, and we immediately saw probably a 20% drop in revenue. So who knows?
So do we begin to, so tell me about the good things that happen out of justice court, because it sounds like a lot of things just don't happen, not by fault necessarily of how you run your court, but by the teeth that the state doesn't give you, right? People can just not show up, they cannot pay. So what is the benefit? What do you walk away at the end of the day saying, but it's good that we're here because?
I don't know.
Oh.
You should never ask an existential nihilist what the point of all of it is.
Well, I'm being asked to commit $234,000 to it, and it sounds like at this point you see no value. So I just thought there must be another side where value is obvious. So would love to hear that.
The big thing that we do is, number one is we're able to take a lot of the load off circuit court. If you go down and talk to the circuit court judges and say, how do you guys feel about another 5,000 or 6,000 cases shoved into your hands that you guys have to handle? Their response will be very non-judge-like. We also give a slightly different way of dealing with things. The examples that really come to mind is right now I'm a pro tem judge that when other judges are on vacation or sick, a pro tem judge can come in and cover for them. So I'm a pro tem judge in Washington County Justice Court, Washington County Circuit Court, Sherman County Justice Court now, and I've also pro tem'd at the Tillamook County Justice Court. And Circuit Court. Yeah, no, I work at the Tillamook County Justice Court.
Keep him in line, Jackie. Where is he supposed to be?
One of the interesting things going from circuit court level to justice court level is that we actually have time to deal with people. As an example, today I had a guy at arraignments who felt very, very wronged by his fishing ticket. And it was a Class D violation. It's the lowest form of violation, but he wanted someone to talk to, and talk he did for 31 minutes to handle one case. I do FEDs for the Washington County Circuit Court, eviction, first appearances. It's not unusual to handle 140 cases in 3 hours. Circuit courts are slammed, and they just don't have the time to sit down and go, all right, what's going on here? One of the things, and the reason I say that there is no value is because I don't know if what I do actually does anything. Actually, about 10 minutes before coming in here, I was in a trial with someone who had, I think this was their 6th speeding ticket in the last 5 years. I increased the fine, and I looked at him and just said, well, I hope that doubling this fine gets you to change your behavior. And he goes, it won't. And I'm like, great, but hope springs eternal. Have a nice day. But I always take time to talk to people, just to remind them that, like, hey, especially high school kids. I was a bit of a bully of myself in high school, and so I now can use those skills for good. But just going like, hey, look, this is how this plays out. You are in what I affectionately refer to as the danger zone, where you kids come up with new and exciting ways to kill yourselves and other people constantly on the roads. And so what that means to you is, I know, you're fine, you'll be fine, you're invincible, but this is going to get really expensive really, really fast because we look for patterns. And when there are kids your age, I find them. And I find them fast, and so you better pray you don't show up back in front of me in the next 4 or 5 years, because then we'll be having a very different conversation. I get to have the time to have that conversation instead of going, all right, here's your sentence, move on, here's your sentence, move on, here's your sentence, which is what circuit courts have to do. They just don't have time for it. So I think that's the big benefit. Does it change or do anything? I don't know. I like to think it does. It probably does less than I think.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, yeah.
So I just want to make sure that I heard correctly that we have in excess of $4 million in uncollected fines.
5 million.
5 million.
Yeah.
Thank you.
5.2 and change.
Okay.
Rounding error.
How
We
much
could
of that
use the money.
money would stay with Tillamook County?
It depends. So the way the fine distributions work out is they're based, and this is going to be a 10,000 foot view. They're based on citing agency. So state of Oregon takes a chunk right off the top. I think it's $65. It's either 50 or 65. I can never remember off the top of my head. This is why we have computers. So the first $65 on a ticket goes directly to the state of Oregon. After that, we have a 50-50 split with either it's like Tillamook City Police, who we're getting the tickets because of an IGA where we're acting as the municipal court. It's a 50-50 split of any additional fines between the city and the county. If it's Oregon State Police, state takes the first $65, and then it's a 50-50 split between the state and the county. Sheriff's Office tickets, they take their chunk of flesh, and then we keep the remainder.
So if you had to guess, just a rough estimation, 10% of that 5 million would stay with the county?
Oh, no, because the county is 50-50 of pretty much every type of ticket. So first $65 goes to the state. After that, be a 50-50 split. Not knowing exactly how much of those have been paid is kind of the hesitation. But I would say it would be, once you take out the 65, it's 50-50.
So we could agree that we're somewhere in the ballpark of between $500,000 and $1 million in uncollected fines that would stay within Tillamook County.
Probably closer to 2.5.
Perfect. How do we change this? That's a huge part. If we had an extra $2.5 million in the budget,
Make a big difference.
it'd make a huge difference.
But now this AR has been collected over how long? This-
20 years.
So you're looking at 20 years worth of money.
Mhm.
So it wouldn't be an ongoing thing, but it would be a huge collection if you could come up with.
Absolutely.
Once a case hits 20 years, the judgment's no longer valid,
Okay,
and
so
we
then they just fall off after
Yep.
20 years.
close it out, zero it out, move
Yeah.
on.
Well, probably my son only has another couple of years left. So it doesn't
just hang on, but
Mental note not to pay
So-
my fine.
Right, you don't
Right.
have to,
It's
clearly.
wild, isn't it?
So to summarize this budget hearing, you don't got to pay your fines. We can't do anything to you. They'll disappear in 20 years.
Well,
That's my next
we've
Facebook page.
we've had this conversation every year when it comes in, which is why he looked at me when I've always asked about the receivables for the very reason you said. You know, there's millions out there that are being uncollected and, you know, and even at the collection agencies, that's what they do, they're not having much success either. So they're getting off for whatever reason. So let me ask you another question that I think needs some explanation, at least for me. You told us you're working pro tem for the circuit court here, and you're also in the Beaverton, and you said as far away as Sherman County, and I'm assuming you don't work for free, so there's some compensation in some form. How do you put all that together if you're not in your courtroom in this building, and you're in Beaverton? Who's paying whom, and how does that net out, or how does that work?
So the Washington County Circuit Court is free. I don't get paid for that.
So we're paying you full-time, but you're over there part of the time.
Right.
Okay.
I'm over there generally 2 days a month, give or take. Washington County Justice Court is 2 to 3 times a year, and then I get paid here and I get paid there. Sherman County, I haven't been called yet, but same thing would apply. And then Tillamook County Circuit Court, they paid me, and I was also paid here, so I did hearings for them in between hearings here.
So I'll ask the obvious then, and I'll turn to the treasurer. Is that typical, or is there any issue with being paid by 2 employers when you're only working for one of them at that moment in time?
So we've had, I know that the Teamsters have a clause if they do outside work outside of the sheriff's office, they have to get the approval from the sheriff. This is the first time I've heard of Ryan working a pro tem.
But as an elected official, we don't,
well-
we're flat salary. And I assumed,
I understand
the
that.
judge would be the same, flat salary.
I would assume it
Okay.
would be scheduled around, his court date, so.
Yeah.
The judicial ethical rules deal with this directly, and they say outside work is allowed as long as your role here at your elected position takes precedent over anything else. They also allow, because I'm a justice of the peace and not a circuit court judge, I'm allowed also to maintain a private practice outside of being a judge. I don't, but it's one of those things where it's allowed just as long as the judicial position takes precedent over it.
So I'm assuming then, and I'm sure this is the case, nothing that comes before you in this building is being deferred or ignored or set aside because you're somewhere else. I mean, it'll eventually get up to your bench and you can deal with it.
Yes, I'd say the turnaround time for probably a letter or a motion filed on average, and there are exceptions because there are things that I have to do a lot of research on, but I'd say the average turnaround time is probably under 24 hours. And that's not working hours, that's time hours. So I think that 99% of what I get to is probably within 12 hours of us receiving it.
That's great.
The big thing is that our system is set up because we're fully electronic, where except for hearings where I'm on the bench, trials, that sort of thing, everything I can do from home. So if I am in Washington County hearing small claims one afternoon, when I get home at 5, 6, 7, then I can just open up my laptop and here's all the letters we've received, here's all the motions we've received. I take care of them, and then my staff gets them in the morning.
Makes sense. So for the benefit of our new members, will you please talk for a minute about being the municipal court judge for cities in Tillamook County?
Yeah. So we have IGAs with Garibaldi, Rockaway, Bay City, City of Tillamook. Am I forgetting anyone?
I don't think so.
Oh. Yeah, Bay City.
Manzanita?
No, Manzanita maintains, they're the only city that still maintains their own municipal court. Where are the rest of them? Wheeler, I think right now is using Manzanita, but are thinking about possibly going with the Justice Court. Now, that could be in the works in the future. I've heard rumors. And I'm always careful when describing this because we're not the municipal courts, because municipal courts are executive branch, justice courts are an Article 7 judicial branch, Article 3 Section 1 prohibits separate branches from doing the roles of the other branch, and so I'm always careful to point out we're not the municipal court and we're not acting as the municipal court. We are receiving things that the municipal court would normally receive and then using them as the justice court. So it's a important distinction for me, less important for you guys. So we hear all of the city ordinance violations, really all the tickets that city police write, sheriff's office connected to Garibaldi, Rockaway write, they all come through us as well. And then we have the fee sharing agreements that I went over, the 50-50 fee shares with them through IGA's intergovernmental agreements. And the IGAs are negotiated and signed off on by the commissioners. I don't get involved in that. I just because the reason I don't get involved is it's a question of jurisdiction. And judicial branch doesn't make jurisdictional decisions. Legislative branch limits and sets what the jurisdiction for various courts are, and then judicial follows.
So to your point earlier about circuit court would not want to take over everything that you're doing. You're not only serving Tillamook County, but additionally several of the cities.
Yes.
Do you feel that the IGAs are actually capturing the right amount of revenue from the cities for the amount of work you do for them? Because it looks like, we're collecting $275,000, which would be our 50% from those jurisdictions, plus what we get when it's our own sheriff's department that writes our tickets, and then our general fund is contributing $234,000. All right, because I don't recall having those IGAs come in front of us, so they've probably been around for a while, perhaps. So. So then the question is, should they be up for negotiation? Or, when you look at how many cases you see, it looks like you're about 50-50, or 50% of them from the cities, 50% from the sheriff, or I guess it wouldn't be quite that split, but.
I'd say probably, and I didn't pull this exact statistic, so I'm
shooting out of the dark, sure.
I'd say 85 to 90% of our cases come from Tillamook City Police. They are the only ones that have an active traffic team, and they are active. So, and one of the things that I highlight each year is that when I got this job 6 years ago, I was really excited because I like data and I like tracking things, looking for trends, trying to figure out things. And one of the things that I bring up with everyone at these, and I think drives Rachel a little bit crazy every time I say it, is that there's no discernible patterns I can find to any of this stuff. As an example, before I looked up some just month citations. And you can get general patterns. There's more citations in the summer than in the winter, right? Because we have 1 billion people driving through. So before this, I looked up the most citations I could find us receiving in a month. The biggest month I found, and I went back about 10 years, I didn't dig too far. The most citations I found was in May of 2017, which had 447 citations filed with us. Since I'd been elected, the biggest month I could find was, actually this was the year I was elected, so it wasn't even when I was here, was July of 2018, where there were 700 tickets filed. And then in June of last year, right after we had this budget meeting, we had 919 tickets filed.
A lot of tickets.
Yeah, about a 25% of our all-time increase from our all-time high.
Yeah.
The following month, July of 2023, we had 423 tickets filed. Over a 50% drop in a month. The following month, in August, we had 623 tickets filed, which was our highest since COVID. One of the city cops on the traffic team had to take a month off from medical leave.
That's what I was thinking. You'd
Yeah.
have to have access to employment records because there are some gung-ho ticket writers.
And so what happens is the amount of tickets we have is the thing that we have zero control over. The Washington County Justice Court, the sheriff's office over there has dissolved their traffic team, and all the municipalities over there maintain their own courts. So the Washington County Justice Court last year heard approximately 4,700 tickets. And before the traffic team was dissolved, they were hearing 10 to 11,000. So that is it's very similar to the issues with like n-body problem in physics, where it's just there's so many variables, none of which connect to each other, that you need to account for independently, that the numbers just stop making sense. And so this year we may have 100,000 tickets, or we may have zero. I don't know.
Well, I wish they'd pay their fines.
Exactly. It'd be worth it if they'd pay their fines.
So speaking of fines, how do we compare on the receivable side with other counties?
I haven't pulled the exact numbers. It's talked about at conferences, just kind of generally. Generally where people try to brainstorm of new and exciting ways to collect accounts receivable, and those are short discussions because they're not there.
Basically, it's a problem, whatever term you want to use, across the state and maybe across the nation for that matter.
It's I can definitely say across the state, it's similar All the courts are similarly situated. I don't know if it's a problem because it seems like the legislative intent is to make this happen, so it
Well,
could be.
that's why I was gonna say, you just got done telling us you're a numbers guy, so why don't you pull up the statistics for Utah and compare them? Since they're the polar opposite of Oregon. Maybe, maybe we could all learn something, and I'm sort of being facetious, but maybe not. Maybe they do it differently.
The problem is getting the data because courts aren't publishing accounts receivable.
Isn't that public record?
I think we'd have to do a public records request. The big thing is I can't do anything with it.
Oh, Rachel can probably handle it.
I agree. This is Rachel's fault.
Well, I'm just joking, but, as Ken pointed out, $5 million is a pretty big number. Even if we only got a relatively small fraction of that, that could make a significant difference. And I know we've had this conversation in one form or another before, but that it seems to be getting bigger. I don't remember what it was last year or the year before, but $5 million is a lot of money. And I'm wondering if we're extraordinary compared to with other jurisdictions, and the answer is we don't know for sure.
With other jurisdictions in Oregon, and I can speak to Oregon, percentage wise, we're probably on par or doing a little bit better than most of them. This is the numbers change just because the size, the amount of citations the court hears change. Anecdotally, when I am covering for Judge Cross over in Washington County at their justice court, it's not unusual for them to have dockets of 80 to 100 people a day. And if 3 people show up, that's considered a pretty busy day. Here, where our, as you saw, our FTA rate is probably about a quarter of our overall cases, which is miles better than most major jurisdictions within the state. Today, I think we had 40 people scheduled and probably.
We got it down, so I think we had 28 on the docket, and we had 15 show up, and then we had 2 at 10 o'clock arraignments.
So we're having more than 50% of the people show up.
Small town people are afraid they'll see you at the store.
Well, I am very threatening.
So we're a little off track here, but.
Oh, we are. Are we ready to move on, Doug?
I
It's
think
3:55. We're now back
I
to
think
being
so.
behind.
Any other questions for the judge or his staff? Okay, we're aware of the situation, and I don't know what we can do about it, but, well, thank you again for coming down.
I proudly hand off the title of the new Bill Porter to Aubrey Olson after I've sat here and talked about nothing for an hour, just like Bill used to do.
Okay, and we are up to the district attorney, last one of the day. So,
Appreciate it, Brian.
Hey, Debbie, could you turn the air conditioning on for a little bit? It's getting really warm sitting up here. I don't know if anybody else is feeling it, but I know Sean's comfy. That means it's time for the air conditioning.
Oh, this seat's warm.
Good afternoon.
so this is Ms. Olson, no relation to me, and she's an elected official, and for how the district attorney herself, in this case, is funded, she's basically a state employee, but there's a stipend that comes out of the county budget. And then I believe all the other staff in your office are county employees, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
I do have 2 people that are paid for, if not 100%, pretty close to it out of a grant.
Okay, but they're on the county's payroll.
They are, yes.
Yeah, so you're the only one who is technically a state of Oregon employee as an elected district attorney.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, and nice to meet new people. This is only my 2nd year to present a budget, 2nd year as district attorney, so a lot of familiar faces, but hello to new people. Last year I came in with PowerPoint presentation I worked really hard on, and I did not do that this year. Um, Basically, I realized that I didn't need it in most parts, and we didn't get there, so I decided not to bore you with that. We also had, again, last year was my first year, and we had I was trying to make a few changes. This year, we've only got about three things to really talk about that are different from previous years. I would actually, just in the interest of time, before I just start blabbing, I mean, everybody's had a chance, I hope, to review our budget documents and our narrative. Is there anyone that hasn't had a chance to review those documents and would like me to just start talking? Because I'm just kind of curious if you've looked at them, what questions are just immediately popping out, so I can just jump the gun and start addressing those.
I always appreciate it when people talk about what's different. If anything's different in the budget, what is it? And why?
Absolutely, and that's what I anticipated. So the big thing, and I was here a couple weeks ago, we got a contract for Axon Services, and that is the number one thing that is different in this year's budget. And it's something that is, and if the commissioners remember that, I believe it was right at 2 weeks ago when we presented and got approval for the contract with Axon Services. And for the new members of the budget committee, I did not anticipate sharing my slides, although I believe Ms. Garland would still have a copy of that if they need to see it. But the long and short of it is, our file system since 2021, October 2021, transitioned from all paper files to a digital file management system. It's called Prosecutor by Carpel. That, we made the switch. We decided not to digitize older files, except for just a few exceptions, and instead just went cold turkey and said all new cases that come into our office from October 1, 2021 onward will be input into our digital case management system. I'll just call it Carpel for short. So all of our new cases come in through Carpel. At that time, we work with, just as a background to those who don't really realize what we do in the DA's office, we receive referrals from all of the local police agencies within Tillamook County. That would be the Oregon State Police with their local people, the Sheriff's Office, the City Police, as well as Manzanita Department of Public Safety. So, and we do get the occasional, we have a few weird little corners of Tillamook County where, like, there's a spot up on Highway 26 where none of our local people ever investigate what happens in that spot. So we get stuff from Clatsop County or other jurisdictions. The same thing out in out on Highway 18. There's a 4-mile stretch that is you have to go through other counties to even get to that section of Tillamook County. So it's not uncommon to see Lincoln County or even Lincoln City having parts of investigations and situations that happen there. So we do receive cases or reports from other agencies that are nearby us. And then there's also some of those cases that maybe they start in Tillamook and they end in Washington County or whatever. So we get referrals from all these different agencies who are investigating criminal cases. And in 2021, when we went to Carpel, only the Tillamook City Police Department was using Axon products, and they had only just switched. We were all switching right about the same time. And so the Axon products are like body cameras, dash cameras, and even Taser, I believe, is an Axon product. Most of them use that, and they upload their information to Axon storage. Their cloud storage is web-based through a site called evidence.com. And so since 2021, when we switched, the City PD went to them and started, what that does is it allows them to upload all their evidence. Instead of mailing us paper copies of reports or physically bringing them over and giving us discs or thumb drives with videos or other evidence, they would upload it to the site and then ping, here it is, just here it is. It's wonderful. One of the selling points to us for Carpel was that they already had, Carpel and Axon already had a contract and they were already integrated. So when we have a case in Carpel and say the City PD refers a case to us, They just send us their report number, we enter the report number, and it just automatically uploads everything that they already upload. So it's pretty seamless. And it has cut down on our time tremendously. And it also allows us, we are required for those, again, I feel like some people understand this process, some people don't. So I don't mean, I hope I'm not talking over or above anyone. I'm just assuming that nobody really knows how it works. But we are required when we file charges against someone, when we bring a prosecution, a case against someone, we are required by law to share what's called discovery. All of those reports, the evidence, it's just called discovery. And so we have to discover all of that information to the defendant. I like to joke that we play poker with two-sided cards. Like I've got my hand, but everybody can see what I have. That's just fair. That's what we do. And so our prior process before we had Carpel was, you know, standing at the copy machine and physically copying all of these reports. We have this big tower disk burner where all of these CDs and DVDs that we burn to another disk, and we would mail that stuff out. With Carpel, and now people being able to upload stuff to evidence.com, we're able to send all this stuff with the touch of a button. Just click, 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 it's out the door. And it integrates with our software as well, and our documents to, we charge for discovery, so defendants do have to pay discovery fees because it helps us to recoup this cost. This system allows us to automatically generate an invoice. It calculates it for us. It saves a tremendous amount of time. So at first it was just City PD. We would still have the other agencies that would send us their reports, and we would have to scan all of that in instead of just copying it. But now every agency except for the Oregon State Police has switched, and they all have Axon. Also, it has increased our workload because Manzanita, they didn't used to have any sort of body cam. They would occasionally, if the case seemed important enough, they would get their cell phone out and start recording. And we would get, you know, a CD with that on it or a thumb drive. The sheriff's office had some type of body camera system that worked sometimes and had a terrible battery life and very low storage. So they would use it sparingly. You'd have a deputy work a 10-hour shift and they'd say, you know, we'd get a case, like say I'd get a Dewey case, and I'm like, well, didn't you run your body camera while you were, you know, doing roadside tests? Well, no, I wanted to save my battery, or I wanted to save this. Sometimes they'd say, well, it was back at the office charging because it had run out. Things like that. So we got to where we didn't even, if we got video from them, we were like, oh, hey, that was a video, woohoo. But they've made the switch. And so now everything is recorded. If 5 officers show up on a scene, 5 officers record the whole time. Even if they're, you know, I don't know, searching for something in the trunk of their car, it's on video. All of this takes up storage space. So they've all started going to evidence.com, which is great for us because now all but Oregon State Police is able to just send it to us, and we have it, and we have it within minutes. We can call over to the sheriff's office. Hey, we're waiting on evidence. 5 seconds later, Rhonda has sent it. Boom, there it is. And our staff is able to send it out. Well, because of this increase in, you know, 3 extra agencies in our county went to Axon products. Well, that's happening nationwide. The public has been demanding more and more video footage from the police. And so every police agency throughout the nation has been jumping on board. And Axon is one of the premier products in the industry. And, you know, DA's offices, same thing. We were one of the last people to board the ship of digital case management, but Carpel is one of the leaders in the industry. So it makes sense that we got a letter from Axon. I think it was right after we submitted our budget documents, but we got a letter that said, hey, guess what? We offered this service for free initially, but now our demand is so overwhelmed that we have to start charging. So that's what it is. And so we looked at our options and we came to the county to request this. It was a contract over 5 years. So we have to pay, I want to say it's about $6,400 in change for the first year. It increases by 4% each year thereafter for a total 5 years. Because of the law and how that works with contracting, we were required to get permission from the board to enter into that contract, which we did get permission to enter. The contract is contingent upon us actually getting the funding each year. And we are allowed to terminate the contract at any point that we don't get funding. So even if we got the funding this year, but we didn't get it next year, we would be in a position to terminate our contract without penalty. So we did look at all of the options and how it would affect us. What do we do? You know, because we did feel, my office manager and I sat down and, you know, I'd say we spent about 3 or 4 hours, you know, just discussing the issue and then on our own time researching what else do we do. And we felt a little bamboozled. I felt a little upset because, you know, we entered this agreement. We were all excited. Look at how this works for us. And then guess what? You want to keep using this awesome thing, you know, pay up. And after all the research we did, we said, well, pay up is what we have to do. If we don't pay up to Axon, the county's going to end up paying up in another way because we've become so reliant on this system because so many people have jumped on. There's no option to go back to the way we used to do things. And in some ways, even if we tried to use another system, it would result in more work on our sheriff's office, which is just another county agency. So the other option would be, well, we can pay overtime, or we'd have to, you know, if we had to do this other system, we'd have to hire somebody else to do the work, which would effectively cost more money in the long run. So that's kind of where we're at, is we have to do something now. Which option is best? And we came to the realization that going with this contract and continuing to use the service is the most cost-effective and efficient way for us to continue our services to the county. So that is the biggest change. Any questions on that before I start launching into the other stuff?
No, the district attorney budget, my question's in the CAMI budget, so are you gonna kind of just walk through them?
The county budget's part of the sheriff's.
Oh, okay.
It's just unfortunately in.
It's in here, okay, never mind then.
For whatever reason, it still lives in our line item, but we, for various reasons and over the last couple of years, I have nothing to do with it.
Perfect, because that's the other one I had a question on, so never mind, we'll save that one. It was in your bundle.
It's there, and
It
I'd
was in your
like to
bundle.
figure out how to get it out of there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because I was like, I don't see the narrative and there's just one question, so.
I know, I cringed a little when I was reviewing my materials in preparation for today, and I was like, it's still there, they're gonna ask me about it, and I'm like, I don't know.
Never mind.
Okay,
Question?
yes.
The $210,000 increase in contracted services, is that all Axon?
No, oh dear, you're gonna have to make
That
me.
might be in the CAMI budget.
Yeah,
And the county budget's
275.
Okay.
Okay. I was like, what are you talking about? See, okay.
Yeah, that was, so the rest of them were reasonable, understandable increases. That was the only one that was
Okay,
like.
that's, yeah, the
and
CAMI
it's not
stuff,
yours.
that's been a thorn, so. But if there's other contracted, that's the, we do have, that is another change though. We are asking, I believe it's $1,000, and it is in the general fund budget for Shred-it services. We have entered a contract with Shred-it for every 8-week pickups. And the reason, so in the past, I believe it's the treasurer's office has always arranged for, I think, once or maybe twice a year to have the Shred-it company come, and all the counties would bring out all their stuff that they're purging. We are required by the whole county, and there's different rules for different departments for different reasons, about, you know, when our retention schedules. It's based on the Secretary of State's, the Oregon administrative rules. And for us, you know, people love to ask me, like, how long do you have to keep a file? It's 5 years, right? I'm like, well, you practically need a math degree to figure out what our retention schedule is, because it's case by case. And there's just differences, you know, was a person convicted? What were the charges? You know, were sentences concurrent or consecutive? And so it can be a pretty intense calculation there. But so some of our files we are able to purge. And like I said, prior to October of 2021, all of our files were paper files. My predecessor had adopted rules of retention that exceeded the Secretary of State's rules, which means our basement storage for our files has practically been overflowing. If anybody's gone down there and noticed the door starting to swell, I'm pretty sure that's our files. Also, previously in our office, we had 2 walls lined with giant file cabinets that had giant boxes on top of those. And everybody always kind of very carefully would walk through the wall of files, always afraid at any moment one of those files cabinets would tip over. When I took office, I decided to increase our retention to go to just the Secretary of State rules and not retain anything that we're not required to retain, which allowed us to start purging more files to make room. Also for fear of, I'm terrified that this building is gonna catch fire and we're gonna lose what files we do have. There is an opportunity for us to digitize some of the files we have to keep. So there are some files we have to keep pretty much forever, or like 99 years or something. And I don't love that those are living in the basement. So I would like to, there is in the Oregon, I think it stands for Oregon Record Management System, ORMS. It's like a $400-something a year fee. Technically, that's the only long-term, greater than 10-year storage, digital storage allowed by the Secretary of State, which is why that is one of the other services on there for storage of those. But we are trying to get rid of stuff we don't need to make room for other stuff, because it falls in line also with our, well, there's a couple reasons. One is just trying to improve our space, our office space. We're at the tail end of a remodel for our office that is just really improving and making the space hopefully OSHA approved. I don't believe it was before. And it was in bad disrepair. So getting rid of those files helps with that, because I could not stretch my arms out to walk down the hall with the files the way they were. So long and short, getting to the point is we have way more files we're getting rid of. And as we digitize, because there have been some that we've digitized that we've said, okay, we can actually get rid of this paper. The other reason, I said there were a couple reasons. The other is that if we have a file and somebody submits a public records request and we still have it, now we have to supply or provide the documents. And some of these older cases that are boxes full we can charge. We do have a fee schedule. We are allowed to charge for our time so we can recoup the cost, but there's a finite amount of time. If my staff is spending hours and hours discovering information, that's hours and hours they don't have to do the rest of their job. And so we're always behind. I finally came to the realization the other day that if I get the chance to retire from this job, I will still not be caught up. It's not going to happen. I'm going to strive every day, but there's going to be stuff I don't think I'm ever going to get to. So by purging those files, we don't absolutely have to have. I know that there's always a look of relief on my office manager's face when somebody's done a public records request and we've been able to legally purge that file. It's like, whew, we don't have to do anything else with it. So we anticipate that we found out that contracted service for every 8 weeks, they give us 2 bins. We're allowed to just keep putting stuff in those and they'll just come pick them up, as opposed to the one day every so often where we all go out there and we're only allowed, that's the other thing, is we're only allowed so many boxes every time they come. And what's happened is we've had so many that we've effectively had to get an independent run just for us that we've paid for out of our law enforcement fund. Because we've just needed to get rid of it. And, it's like they show up and everybody brings their files out and we still have all these behind us. Like, what about these? So we have done that, and we've realized it's actually a lot cheaper in the long run to do this contracted service than to have them come, when we need them. So we don't anticipate that lasting forever because, like I said, we stopped creating files. So there's a point where we're done. We don't have any more files to purge, at least the paper ones. So that's that on the contracted services. I hope that covered that.
I liked your idea about restarting the law clerk program.
Thank you. I anticipated a lot of questions about that, but I was waiting for questions before I started talking about it.
I think it's a great idea.
Thank you.
So here's a question I've always asked your predecessors. Are there any giant trials, meaning major felonies and so on, that would require expert witnesses from out of state and all of that? Because I remember Mr. Porter had 2 or 3 that by the time you brought in witnesses, it was another 60 or 80 or $100,000 to bring them in. And so is there anything, I mean, I'm not asking you to predict a murder in May, but, is there anything, and I know these things take a long time.
Yes, but we do, when we forecasted in our budget, we go off of the cases that are currently pending. And part of that is, out of the several murder cases that we have pending, all of them are set for trial long after it happens. So by the time I do I guess there are the cases, people have a right to speedy trial. Murder cases are different. So like I said, every one I've ever had, we're not sitting trial. The trials are getting set 2 years after the incident. And so we do have those. We are able to anticipate those witnesses. Those expenses are budgeted for expert witnesses, psychological evaluations. I will say that I did save us money because we resolved the case. I shouldn't speak too soon because we have a court hearing coming up, but we do have a settlement agreement. And the case is believed to resolve in a murder case, and we were expecting to spend thousands of dollars on a psychological eval that we no longer have to do because it resolved outside of that. So fortunately, we anticipate and think we're probably going to need this, but we're always grateful when we don't. On the flip side of that, we do have a very serious, I believe it's a Jessica's Law case, meaning that the defendant is facing up to 300 months in prison. It's an in-custody trial, and our victim and primary witness moved to the UK.
Oh, no.
So we've had some pretty serious discussions about the importance, going to trial on that and what the tickets would cost. Do we get the refundable tickets in case something happens? Working with the court to make sure that we have a dedicated time. Because what the courts do is they set a bunch of cases for trial because things happen constantly. There's resets all the time. Things resolve at the last minute. It never fails. And so for this case, we're looking at it saying if we set this trial and we buy plane tickets, we want to know that it's going to trial. Because refundable tickets cost twice as much. So, there's that dilemma. Do we spend twice as much knowing we can get our money back if something happens? So we're trying really hard, making sure that we're not just willy-nilly. It's like this case is definitely one that we want to proceed with. It's very important. Even though the victim no longer lives here, the defendant does. He lives over on Long Prairie. He might get a new address somewhere else in the state of Oregon, but it is a challenge for us to determine, but we do know what's in the pipe. Now, I can say I have one case where I have an expert witness that I am hoping to be able to bring in from Boston. That is obviously an expert in his field. I tried to get someone from Oregon, and the person in Oregon was like, "You're really going to want that guy. He's the one that can really testify for you." And I was like, "But you live 2 hours away." And so there's other options for remote testimony, but if a defendant objects to it, there's nothing I can do. The court's going to go, "No, you got to bring him in person." It's just that right, those constitutional rights to face your witnesses. So, but we try really hard. So, but I have this one case. It initially, the person was in custody and he wanted to go to trial within 60 days. So we were initially set for trial, and I was going to try to get this witness in remotely. For a variety of reasons, that got postponed to next year. So that one wasn't actually budgeted for, but now it is because it got pushed. So now I know about it, but there are those potentials. But we know that, we've historically been, safe is a scary word to use, but fairly safe in saying, like, these are the cases we have coming up. And if we base it on those cases, historically things fall apart over here, but now we need the money over here. And so it comes out in the wash. Does that help answer your question?
It does, thank you. I do recall, and I don't know what the details were, but we're bringing in 3 or 4 people for a capital offense, was upwards of $100,000. And so that was my question, if there's anything in this next upcoming fiscal period where you're gonna need to bring people in from Boston or wherever, and you answered it, I think, that you don't know and there are extraneous circumstances.
I can't imagine it. I think we budgeted for 15,000, not 100.
I think that's what I read in here,
So that seems pretty extreme. I don't, but every now and then we do have those.
Maybe, I shouldn't speak ill of the retired, maybe he asked for extra money than he needed. I don't remember, but it was a huge number.
And there may have been a case at some point, you know, every now and then we have those landmark cases.
Yes.
And, you know, we do what we do, but we do have those discussions and we're very careful with what we're gonna prosecute and how we're gonna spend the money and that kind of thing. We don't wanna just take anything and everything to trial and, you know, spare no expense, you know, that's not our mentality.
No, well, I appreciate that, and I know there's so many unknowns, and, you know, you do what you have to do and what the law requires, I understand that. Anything else for Ms. Olson or the district attorney's office?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Okay, let me ask the budget committee then, are there any questions that need to be answered or asked or resolved before we adjourn for the day? Doesn't sound like it. Okay, let's at 4:23, we will adjourn to reconvene tomorrow at 1 o'clock. Will we get a new filler? Yeah, so do you need?
I have it all.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I wrote notes in there.
Yeah, so, yeah.
Only a third of the work.
Yeah.
All right, okay. But I won't need it tomorrow.
So tomorrow come in at 1 o'clock.
Oh, I don't know. I thought he said we're gonna do something on Thursday.
So, hey, Sean? So are we gonna keep this one intact, and when we get all done, there'll be 3 books, or what? Okay,